You won't work it, don't pay the price, you won't make it. I don't even care where this road leads. All I know is when my heart.
Boom shakalaka, ladies and gentlemen, freaks and geeks, brothers and sisters around the world. You're looking at the beautiful Nicolette Pankovics here in Australia, mate. Like yours truly, I'm currently in the Gold Coast, and you may have seen the last interview I did with the lovely Nicolette. She is a criminologist, she is a metaphysician, she's a researcher, a nutritionist, amongst many other things. And we spoke about essentially what the corporate gangsters have been up to, creating this dream spell, trying to get you all to, to give up your freedoms to keep you all safe, and a lot of the other things that is going on in the world. So I wanted to pick up on that and delve into some other topics we didn't get a chance to go into. Like, there's a lot of stuff going on here with the bill that was passed in Melbourne about giving these governmentalists more powers to take away our rights and so forth. But we're also going to talk about the metaverse, talk about Bitcoin, so speak about essentially everything that is going on in this crazy world. But before I get into it, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in, by the way. For everyone that has been following my journey for the last, been like 8-9 years or so, thank you. Be sure to check us out on iTunes if you have not done so. I would love you guys to give me a review. If you guys want to get this stuff out there, be sure to give us a review. I think I only have a couple of reviews at the moment, and one of them is from me. So come on, guys, give us a review. It'll help get this podcast out to more people. Tell your mom, tell your friends. If you're following us on the Patreon, thank you once again. By the way, I have a book that I'm going to be releasing. It's coming out in the next maybe few weeks. It's called Vegan Prince, Warrior King, where I speak about philosophy of ahimsa and living an authentic life and essentially a plant-based diet. You know, got to get those vegan gains, yo. Ladies and gentlemen, keep an eye out for that. But without further ado, introducing the beautiful, the intelligent, the wisdomatic, the powerful warrior priestess, Nicolette Pankovics. How you doing, girl?
I'm good. How are you? It's been a crazy 2 months since I last saw you.
It has been a while. I spent New Year's Day at your pad, actually a friend's pad, and we spoke about a lot of the things that are going on in the world. I met some good friends of yours that were into the crypto scene, and I pretty much fled Melbourne to get away from these crazy pandemic bills that had come into effect. And we were just speaking a moment ago. You mentioned that there is some stuff going on with that. So how about we start off there? What's going on with the pandemic bill? What's going on in Melbourne? What's going on in your world?
So, yeah, I've been well. So recently, obviously, you know, in end of last year, they passed the pandemic bill. They were going to vote on it. And then when they found out that they didn't have the numbers, they then delayed the vote, which till they had the numbers, which I don't know if you can call that democracy. But that's what happened there. So part of the pandemic bill was to provide transparency in the Andrews government and the health officers' decision making, which means they needed a panel of experts. Now, I've been calling out, you know, all the radio stations around here, all the reporters saying, where is this transparency? We've had code brown orders issued to our hospitals. We've had extensions.
Code brown orders? What are they?
Code brown is pretty much here in Victoria is limiting the hospitals from doing even things like elective surgeries and just basic access to healthcare, because the system is inundated because of Omicron, apparently. The system was inundated with Omicron, but what was happening with this, which came out, was they were saying there was all these numbers in the hospitals because of COVID cases. And what they actually found out was people were there presenting with a broken leg or gastro, and because they had COVID, they were there in the hospital because of COVID, not linked to. So again, there was that data fudged. So yeah, they had the pandemic bill, and with this, the government is supposed to provide 2 weeks transparency every time a decision is made, and it still has not happened. In fact, they've only just appointed the people as of this week. There they are putting in all these emergency authorizations power without even committing to that bill. And they've been saying, well, it's taken us time to find these people. But remember, they've been drafting this bill since March 2020.
Sure. We knew that was going to happen, though,
Oh,
because you spoke about the bill. It went through a lot of changes before it was even passed, right? And they had to stop the voting to try to get more politicians to vote for it. But essentially, when it was passed, one of the things that was required was transparency, which you're speaking about, right? And we knew that ultimately, if anything, the government has been the most untransparent with the current system, which is still supposed to have some kind of transparency. You can't just do anything. They just circumvented the Constitution, circumvented all these laws. So I would only presume that we would see the same in this bill. And
well, the same thing happened, for example, what's happening in Canada, with what Trudeau just passed. That's ruling by decree. This is what this government tried to do. So it's really funny that all these political leaders have the same script to want to rule by decree, and yet the pandemic is waning.
Absolutely.
So what is the reason behind this? And there is a reason, and we'll get to that.
Of course. Well, we can't get too conspiratorial, but I'm sure
No.
our viewers have imagined that this is not just about a pandemic. It's not just about the juice. It's a political game. You know, in the same way that we're seeing corporations essentially trying to make a dollar. We're seeing these politicians continue trying to maintain their power, and as a result, they're pulling these laws that are essentially going to protect them, I think. And like in terms of the situation with Canada, I mean, the last I heard was Trudeau is trying to get some kind of emergency bill to stop the protesters. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you've been under a rock, essentially in Canada, we had the biggest protest in history, where we have over 1 million. And it's funny, it's not just, this is the same thing going on in Canberra. We've had millions of people now stand at Parliament, and this stuff has not been covered by the mainstream media. Both the mainstream media in Canada are projecting this narrative that it's only, to quote Trudeau, it's only a small minority of people that are against this thing. And it's pretty much the same narrative that we're hearing here in Australia, that there are not many people at these protests. But essentially, we have millions of people at
the biggest
these protests
around the world.
Yeah, exactly. But specifically
in history.
Sure. In Canada, they've stopped they've stopped business. I mean, essentially you have these truckers, and you need them in order to get commodities into certain convenience stores. And it's created what Trudeau is essentially claiming a state of emergency, because this is the only reason he can use in order to bring about this act, right? That's going to allow him to freeze the bank accounts of protesters. I mean, now they're even targeting people that are supporting these protesters with money. Now they're actually going to go out. Essentially, there was this GoFundMe account, right, for the truck drivers and the protesters, and it got up to well over $1 million. I think it was almost $10 million.
Close to 10 million.
Yeah, and they shut that whole thing down because they're calling the protest somehow a violent protest, when the people there, it's pretty obvious they're being friendly. And the funny thing is, they're protesting against government overreach. The fact that Trudeau has no right to do any of this stuff. It's a human rights violation, and he's created the narrative these people are violent, they're racist, and so forth. But Trudeau, in response to this, has said, well, the only way to confront this thing is more government overreach. We're going to pull this emergency act, which you're not supposed to be able to pull unless it's a state of emergency. How is what is going on right now like a real state of emergency? I mean, it's supposed to be something relating to, some country is about to invade. They've openly said they're going to invade us, but no, now protesters are violating that. But anyway, long rant done. I just wanted to create the narrative there. So in terms of what's going on there and how we resolve this stuff, I mean, what do we do, Nicolette? How do we overcome this insanity?
The thing is, like, what these, as we've seen, is like, it's not about health anymore. These decisions are not about health. Like the protesters, are pretty much protesting against the mandates, yet 90% of these truckers are vaccinated. So there goes that argument out the door.
Oh, wow. Didn't think about that.
No. So there's that thing. And it's all about the mandates. And it's really interesting what's been happening, because the protests are very smart and cunning to the point where you have to sit there and be like, applaud them. So for example, Trudeau wanted people to stop helping the truckers. So anyone caught giving gas or petrol to the truckers, they would, take the gas away. So the whole town of Ottawa, most of the people, I've got videos of it, and everyone's walking around with a gas can to throw him off the scent. And that's why he's throwing this thing. So now the next thing is taking away people's access to bank accounts. Now, what will lead into is two things, and there's two ways in which you can look at it. It's forcing people to go down the road of going towards more cryptocurrencies and NFTs. I don't know if you saw the NFT organized, the DAO that got raised for Julian Assange recently with an NFT. $54 million got raised for him through NFTs.
Oh, wow.
Have a look at that to help with his legal proceedings.
Let's expand on that a little, because I mean, this is my area of specialty, but even me, like, because it's such a new area, like I'm still trying to understand why this whole NFT thing has just exploded. I mean, why NFTs as opposed to Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies? What is it about this new emerging technology that is catching the world by storm, and why they specifically use NFTs for the new Julian Assange thing?
Look, I still don't know the exact technicalities of it, because I'm still new to the NFT space. I mean, We've got one ourselves that we've developed, but I'm still learning how, because it progresses so far. It's like the new .com, but it's just a new way in which can be decentralized, which the banks and, for example, what we saw with the GoFundMe, they don't have control over this. But at the same time, they don't have control of this. So it's almost like Trudeau and these organizations have pushed people towards NFT digital currency. But at the same time, this is a good thing. It's also a thing where this was where currency was going to go anyway, because fiat is dead. Fiat is nothing. So if we look at the way in which we've seen things happen, what fiat does is provide people with privacy. If you've got cash, people don't know your business of what you're doing. But with obviously digital currencies and that, they do. And so we know that data is the new gold and energy is the new currency.
Well, can I just interject with that? I mean, I know what you're saying, generally speaking, with fiat. I mean, obviously, when we're talking about cash, obviously you have more privacy. That's what we want, right?
Yeah.
But now everything is on credit cards. Credit cards is still a form of fiat, but they're traceable as well. So whereas I understand cash is not, credit is, and so are cryptocurrencies to some extent. But bearing in mind, it's like a whole new area. There are cryptocurrencies that are less traceable. Like Bitcoin is pseudonymous. I mean, it's traceable, but there's still more privacy. But then, of course, the coins like Monero, where the government, for the most part, really can't track that stuff. So I hear what you're saying, but I just wanted to clarify that. But I think fundamentally, fiat currencies, they're obviously not a good thing, and they're also not really that private in at least the current iteration where we're moving away from cash, right?
Cash is, I would say, well, it depends on how you look at fiat. Fiat in the credit system and how we have banking, no, it's not private, because they can track you. And exactly what has happened with Trudeau, he's trying to withhold people's bank accounts. With crypto, it's not quite there yet, because the governments, for example, SES and all that stuff, haven't caught up with how to find their way to regulate it yet. They will with some cryptocurrencies, but maybe not all. I mean, that's why it's ever moving. People are always trying to, before the laws catch up, the criminals are out there creating the crimes faster than the lawmakers.
Absolutely.
Which I've always found really interesting. Like, wouldn't you want to get an ex-con to work for your organization? But the police don't do that. It's really interesting that oh, you just blocked out there. So yeah, it's
back. All right.
Yeah, you're back. So it's just a way of, maybe, as I said, it could go two ways. Trudeau has pushed people towards cryptocurrencies, but it also means that to have a cryptocurrency, it is all about being digital. And because fiat and that old economy is dead, we were bound to go to this type of currency anyway. I mean, I don't know if you've gone into your new Woolies and you go to the checkout, the self-checkout, and now it's asking you, would you like to pay with digital transactions now? You
Sure.
haven't picked
Oh,
up on that
really?
yet.
As in like
Yep.
cryptocurrencies?
Yep.
Oh,
I can,
wow.
so you can now pay with QR
Ethereum.
codes.
Oh, QR codes, but actual
Yeah.
digital in terms of cryptocurrencies, not credit cards.
Yeah, I've got a cryptocurrency card.
Oh, wow. By the
Yeah.
way, Woolies, by the way, is a major convenience store here in Australia, mate.
Yeah.
But
Sorry.
so essentially, we're Trudeau, and it seems the governments essentially are pushing towards these definitely or cashless, systems,
Cashless.
digital cryptocurrencies. And in terms of Julian Assange, we raised, did you say $54 million in
54.
order?
Well, that's when I last looked at it this morning.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
What's going on with Julian Assange, by the way? Have you been following?
I haven't kept track of it a lot because sometimes it always changes, but I think he's
Yeah.
being extradited. I
Yeah,
have to look into that. I could be wrong, so you have
That's
to
right.
fact check me later on.
Yeah, basically, the last I heard, a court ruled that they were. I think they were trying to challenge some extradite thing there, and essentially the court ruled in favor of allowing the U.S. government to extradite him. So now I think Julian Assange's team might appeal that, but essentially this guy has been taken for trial in the United States for nothing other than being a journalist, essentially publishing information, right, from a source. Bearing in mind, same information which was also published by a major news corporation. I want to say New York Times or something like that. It is so obvious in the 21st century what is going on. There's no way to spin it. The government is playing bully. And I think we're reaching a point now where, I mean, we're here already. Ayn Rand would speak about this as the ultimate state of inversion or something like that, where essentially a government can justify anything. They'll do anything. The whole concept of human rights now has been thrown out the window. There's this argument of, well, it's for your safety, and it's used time and time again, whether it's with freedom of speech, whether it's, I mean, I think eventually they're going to start just openly rounding people up. And I mean, obviously at the moment, it's not as in your face, but forcing them to, well, go to jail, and what next? Actually kill them. I think it's easy. I mean, we had this discussion a while ago where police officers were thinking about what kind of weapons to use in order to keep protesters away from the situation. And it's like, well, once you start using guns, you cross the line now, because now you're actually willing to kill people, right? And
well, just to interject there,
sure,
quickly, in the Canberra protests, I don't know if you saw, they had the LRAD Systems there, and they're sort of like, I forgot what it stands for. I always remember the acronym. I'm really bad at this. So the LRAD systems are these sonic systems, which are very high pitch and decibel to the point where it can actually damage your eardrums
disperse
and
crowds. Yeah,
and disperse crowds.
Sure.
And there's a few people that actually, there was a hearing about it, and they said, oh no, there weren't any there. Trust me. I think one of a guy from the AFP was on at a hearing, and then now they've just come out with photographic evidence that they did have them there.
Yeah, the government line is a big deal. Yeah, we know that stuff. And look, I was fired at last year. I mean, rubber bullets, mind you, but I never thought we'd cross that line. Many of us thought we wouldn't cross that line here in Australia, the home of the land and free. But we have, and we're crossing many other lines. Like you were, I know we've kind of just kind of moved up the topic a little bit. We're talking about the bill earlier, how essentially there's no transparency, and they're just putting they're putting new laws and so forth. And I think
the fact that we have to have a bill for them to be transparent. Why weren't they transparent at the beginning? And why aren't people asking these questions?
Yeah, it's not like we don't already have checks and balances in place. It's that most people are not aware of it. We do actually have a constitution. Even the states are supposed to be beholden to this thing, but because of this world of proportionality, now the states, even the judges are using their discretion to ignore all of this stuff and saying that, well, we're in a state of emergency. They've changed the constitution, and now we have it so much that people like myself have been considering leaving the country. In fact, I've been caught up in this whole thing as to where to go over the last few months, and I've run into some problems. I mean, it's not just a matter of leaving the country right now, because this is the bigger problem. It's going on around the world. But I guess the good thing is that we have seen a lot of countries that are turning around. El Salvador, Mexico, Norway recently. They've
UK.
the UK, the restrictions. But now I just spoke to my friend, UK correspondent King Peter, and they're now pushing for legislation to take away freedom of speech. So, I mean, what do you think in terms of what's going on? Do you see this thing as being over on the end, or do you see this thing as ramping up and us getting more draconian with laws and measures?
It's so hard to say anything. It just sort of, as you said, you're escaping the country. I just have to bring up. I've got a friend who wants to write a book saying how I escaped the free country.
Wait, what was it called?
How I escaped the free country.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's really hard. I think what is happening is that there's the only way in which they can really silence it is silencing social media, because as we have now seen, especially in the last year and 6 months, with all the, I mean, we've all seen what's been happening with Joe Rogan. Our news sources that we used to go to, people are now seeing through the repetitive and their script they've been getting. I think there was I don't know who it was, but there was a video where it shows you all these newscasters in America, and they're saying the exact same thing word for word.
Sure.
So we are moving away from listening to what we used to think were credible news sources to people who are like yourself doing podcasts. So, and there have been censorship on even platforms such as YouTube. I know my comments have been censored on YouTube.
Oh, no doubt. I'm being shadow banned like crazy right now. And anyone that is speaking any kind of truth is. Even my Instagram account. I mean, I got access to live streams just recently, but then I'm finding that I'm still targeted in terms of people getting a warning if they want to follow me, you know, and I kind of like it because I think people are probably curious. They're like, whoa,
you're saying the right thing then.
Yeah.
It's like with there used to be, what was it used to be called, the Great Firewall of China, and now it's just the Great Firewall of the world. From what we've been seeing. But you know, as I said, humans are ingeniouses, ingenuitive. We will find a way
innovative.
to get that information out there.
Absolutely. You made a point about how as we find these new technologies coming about that are used to enslave us, there are always people that come out with better technologies to fight this stuff. Like there's a whole underground network now of people that are coming up with things to essentially circumvent, you know, whether it's the V passports or just allow themselves to participate in the society. Because a lot of people have this mindset. I just want to clarify this, that, oh no, you're being a rebel, what you're doing is wrong, right? But people have to realize, because this is what my whole message is about, that you have to be able to delineate between legalese, what the government is doing, because the government will justify anything. There was a time when slavery was legal. There was a time in West Virginia where it was compulsory to hunt runaway slaves. You have to delineate that which is legal between that which is actually moral, that which is lawful, right? And the government now is behaving, I would say, unequivocally, unlawfully. And in order to actually defend yourself, you need to come up with ways to circumvent that. It's kind of like the Underground Railroads a few hundred years ago that were used to transport Black slaves. I mean, that was illegal. And in the same way, people are trying to circumvent these mandates that are restricting your movement. And I'm having people telling me things like, oh, you know, your behavior is illegal. You shouldn't be doing that. I'm like, bro, I am willing to use whatever amount of force and lie to the government if they're trying to kill me. I mean, if someone's telling me I can't leave my home, puts a gun in my head, people seem to have dispensed with their common sense and understanding of basic human rights and like what I'd call like the common law. You know, you have a right to defend yourself. And like, at what point are we going to, at what point do you say enough is enough? Because this is the question, right? I mean, assuming that this thing is not over, at what point are you going to say, well, look, I'm not going to let the government do this to me? What am I just going to vote some other person in power that is going to uphold these unlawful mandates?
I mean, the biggest thing is what we've been seeing is that we've gone from this sort of mentality of fear and then putting it towards guilt on the people. So, which we'll have to, I'll let you let me get back to this experiment about fear after this conversation.
Sure.
But as we've seen with the Milgram experiment, and I don't know if you know who Philip Zimbardo is.
Let's go into
He's
him.
written this book called The Lucifer Effect, and he also was responsible for the Stanford prison experiments. And it just shows you how people who do comply without not knowing are usually the ones that create the most heinous acts. People think you actually have to go and commit acts yourself, but just standing there and watching someone get beaten when you know it's not right is actually more despicable than intervening or rebelling.
Well, what it does to your psychology, no doubt. I think the acts that you passively partake in, even though you're not actually committing the violence, that does a lot of harm to your psychology. But you bring up a really important question, which is why I love having you on this podcast. You get into the psychology of this stuff, which I think is so important. You were the first, I'll just quickly mention, to bring up the concept of mass psychosis to me, And
I built, and everyone was saying it was, what's his name? Robert Malone. It was like, oh.
I think a lot of people attribute it to Robert Malone, but of course it's Matthias
Desmond.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So in terms of the whole mass psychosis thing, one of the biggest things I've been hearing, this has actually been put forward by the mainstream, right, is that it is offensive to use that term. Like it's so ridiculous because it's not looking at the issue, and it's kind of like a way of just it's kind of like an insult, like an ad hominem. It's like just saying, "Oh, you guys are just are being stupid." I heard this argument that was used in order to censor people that are bringing up this whole mass psychosis thing, but our perspective, I would imagine, is how else do you justify information which is so blatantly obvious? Because the problem here is that the debate is not even really being had, right, in regards to the boom shakalaka, the juice, all that kind of stuff. It's just given. People just say, oh, it's obvious. It's like the science is settled, right? And I would say the reason as to why we think you guys are being ridiculous is the fact that we're not even hearing this debate. You guys don't even want to talk about this stuff. And when you do talk about it, you come up with the most asinine justifications, and when people like myself that actually research and look at the data, we're thinking to ourselves, how else do you justify people that don't even want to have the conversation, are coming out, are either working from a place of fear, which in my opinion creates like a form of like psychosis anyway. Therefore, I have to assume that there's some kind of psychology going on in your mindset.
There is, and this is where I was getting to. I told my partner about this. Have you ever heard of the little Albert experiment?
No.
So I think it was John B. Watson. He conducted this study, and it was to do with conditioning primarily, but he used fear as the condition. So what he would do was he got a little baby called Baby Albert, and he would present Baby Albert with a white bunny, and behind him he would crash cymbals. Like this is not like ethical anymore.
Yeah, it's kind of torture, right?
This is probably 60s, 70. So it got to that point where they kept on obviously creating the cymbal crashes with the bunny, to the point where all they had to do was present the bunny, and the baby would cry. So it got to the point, and this is what's really,
of course, yeah.
I'm going to go. This is a little long thing. They got.
I know where you're going. Like, go on.
6 months later. There's a part in fear conditioning where you have a little bit of an extinction period, or I forgot the name of the word, where it sort of tapers off. And then they presented the rabbit again, and Baby Albert was, okay, maybe I can touch it. And then they, with one, again, conditioned response, afraid, terrified again. And what they did was they never unconditioned Baby Albert. So it got to the point where he was scared of like the Santa Claus mask, the beard, and even cotton balls. Which is quite comical to think about it. But if you got to think about what's happened in the last 2 years, we have, especially as a generation of very young people who are never going to be unconditioned from this. So putting that fear response in is going to be a lot more easier because it's already been implanted. And look what is exactly happened, right? So we've had COVID, we've had 2 years of fear and COVID and this unknown enemy. So then what are we now pushing towards? And I've seen people write something like this: I'm now I went from being afraid of COVID to now being afraid of war. What we're seeing now, the Russian invasion, peddling fear and war. And what's the next best thing to make money besides pharmaceutical companies? The military industrial complex.
No, well, that's old school stuff, like military.
There was
invading.
actually
Yeah.
An article that came out, and it's been
Mhm.
shown that Bloomberg released a heading last week saying how Russia invaded Ukraine, and that never happened. And you followed the link, they took it down. You followed the link and had all these descriptions. Like, how did they have? And they're saying how we just write headings ahead of time. Like, well, how did all that detail come into it? So again, there's this propaganda of now let's peddle this fear of war.
That is such a salient point, and my mind is just, going off just in terms of how the same psychology has been implemented in order to condition us to do a whole bunch of things. Like, I would say that in the same way that anti-vaxxers now are hated by the general population.
Well, it's now the double waxes, because they don't count anymore. You got to be tripled.
Yeah, in fact, I recently heard the immunization body of Australia. They believe that it's possible we may need five juices now in order for you to be registered as being fully vaxxed. And I think we're up to 3 at the moment.
And the thing is
that to announce that, yeah.
The thing is that I know people who got Omicron and then went out and got the third. And you're just like, don't you believe in science and natural immunity? Like, and the thing is now we're being told to go get this third one, and yet Pfizer are coming out saying we're bringing out the new Omicron vaccine or juice to help you. So it's like, why are we getting the third one when you're saying it doesn't work, and you're bringing out, and you're looking at people and like, can you not put pieces together and just people just like being told what to do?
Absolutely. And I'm going stir crazy because, look, I was at a party just a few weeks ago, and some guy had just gotten COVID, right? And I just had a thought. I'm not going to delve into this for various reasons, but the word COVID was such a joke before. But just in light of what is going on right now, you know what I mean? With I don't even want to mention it. It is. We'll save this for another part, the bonus section. But I'm like, oh, COVID has a whole different meaning. But look, bottom line is this guy, got the I think it was maybe, let's say, the Omicron or whatever it was, right? And he recovered from it, and he was telling me like he's already signed up to get his next booster jab. And I'm like, why are you doing that, man? Like, you've already got that and you recovered from it. And he's like,
this is the best thing to have.
Yeah, and he's like, well, you can never be too immune. And I'm like, oh, that's a thing now. So it's like, oh, you now not only need to get natural immunity, even though this guy got the juice to begin with, right? And whether or not it was that or whether it was natural immunity, now we need to keep on getting boosters just to get more and more, just to be safer. There's this attitude of, well, you can never be too safe, right? So it's like someone that gets immunity from some kind of disease. Well, why not just get even more immunity? I'm like, when did this become a thing? This is like, you people typically get the juice, right, for whatever it is, a disease, and then they're like, I'm good for at least a few decades, right? I mean, at least that's been a norm in my experience. I can only speak in my experience, right? Like, I got inoculated against various things, as a kid, I'm sure, and it's not like.
So did I.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But this idea, it's been a couple of months now, I got to get more just to be safer.
Which it just shows you it's not a again changing that language of what a boom shakalaka is. It's not a boom shakalaka, it's a treatment. But yes. I actually had an argument with someone, and I had to this is the first time I've actually got angry at someone who told me that natural immunity does not exist. It's never existed. And the only reason why we are where we are as humanity is because of the boom shakalaka. And
oh my God, here we go.
And this person is an ex-nurse, by the way. And it astounded me. And I said, you can actually help fight diseases with diet and exercise. And they were like, that's never happened in the history. I'm like, diabetes. Wow. But I actually remembered as a child, I don't know if you had it where you're from, but we used to have chickenpox parties. So when a child would have chickenpox, all the parents would bring their kids so the child can get chickenpox as well at that time, because they knew it wasn't as dangerous as a child. And then that would provide you natural immunity for the rest of your life.
Oh my God. Well, I'm a big proponent of the science has changed, right? But it's like the science, because It's like, because I'm finding, because the mainstream media has been wrong so often, right, in this whole thing. Like, we found out they were wrong about many things in regards to the efficacy of lockdowns and so forth and so forth. It's like the only way to address that now, right, being wrong about the actual science, is to change the very foundation of the science in order to support what you've done. So rather than saying, oh, we were actually wrong about advocating for something, juice or something like that, now it's to say, now when you found out that it actually didn't do anything, you can start making arguments like, well, I mean, it's actually new science now that being healthy doesn't actually do anything in terms of exercising or eating the right kind of foods. And the only way to protect people is to actually push for the juice, right? So, I mean, that's obviously the best thing to do, even though it may not have been that effective. And rather than just acknowledging the fact that, wait, the best option in a situation like that is actually to protect your immune system by eating healthy, getting exercise. Well, now the science has changed in order to address the science that you thought was science, which has changed, which you were wrong about. I know that's a little hard to follow, but everyone's changing the boundaries now, at least the mainstream media, because it seems that their narrative is not making sense, I would argue.
They've actually now proven, and again, going back to diet and exercise, I mean, we know that obesity was a huge factor of people catching and dying from COVID. That's not a conspiracy. We know that. It's an underlying condition. We wonder why it exploded in America is because they are the land of the fat. And they've now actually proven that
land of the fat and the free.
The land of the fat and not so free right now. Yeah. They've now proven that even people who are obese, even if they get the wax and stuff, they cannot produce the antibodies and T cells to protect them.
Ooh, we're going into science now.
As much as someone who is lean. So it just shows you, like, should we maybe have not only focused on the so-called treatment, or should we also focus on upping up people's natural immunity? We've diet, we've exercised, but no, we told people they weren't allowed to train and exercise, and then we told them we only let fast food places open. So again, it's creating a healthier people, not just with pharmaceuticals, but in general, in general, creating healthy minds and healthy bodies. And my idea was the other day, and I couldn't believe I couldn't think about this earlier, because we were all locked in and shut down. Everyone was, and we had access to TVs, because I don't have a TV, but majority of populations. Why didn't we have morning and lunchtime classes, free classes that the government could issue for people that went for half an hour, exercise classes? We used to have that back in the day in Australia, how you have your morning radio TV presenters, and then they would follow it up with like a fitness routine. So why didn't we do that, for example, to promote mental health and exercise and stuff like that?
Well, this is all in
hindsight, but it makes sense.
Yeah, it's like, sure, that all makes sense when you're working out of the conventional science, right? But no, look, the new science has shown that it's not very effective. We all need to get the jab. This is what you hear from Fauci. This is what you hear from all of these proponents of the priesthood of science. And this is why we are in the situation we're in. And what I find really alarming about this, because we speak about, I guess, different motivations, and the economic motivation, I think, is the real red herring here. I mean, recently, and I want to be clear about this, the CEO of Moderna dumped 400 million in stock and then deleted his Twitter account. Now, I'm not saying this means anything. I'm not saying that this is to take away trust. I personally think he's just a very charitable person, and obviously, he's just he knows that the price of this thing is going to go up a lot, and as a result, he didn't want to make lots of money. But I think most people, when they see things like that, it tends to erode their confidence. It's like, why is someone dumping all this stock right now? And from what I understand, we're reaching a point now where I know there was a court case where I think it was one of these companies had to start releasing, in fact, you mentioned this on the last podcast, start releasing all the data in regards to the testing and so forth. And it was going to take, initially they wanted to have this thing take over 70 years, I think it was.
75 years. They're still pushing for it. They have to now release it some of it by August.
Yeah, but as we start clamping in on the testing and exposing more of the what I would say the safety in regards to this. Now, personally, I think this is totally safe whatsoever, but I think it's only natural that these companies are going to start wanting to just to take their money out because perhaps they don't trust well what they've been spouting as much as they do. And this is just, I mean, this is what corporations do. It's not like there is anything conspiratorial about this. You know, this is why I'm so frustrated. It's like people have forgotten that these corporations in the past, so forget everything that's happened. This is post 2020, have had a reputation of fucking up many, many times. You know, being caught up in legal suits, in
cause more
damage.
deaths than anything else. People are more
Absolutely.
scared of a serial killer than a corporation. And a corporation is 10 times more harmful or 100 times more harmful.
Absolutely. And it's like people, one of the things I keep hearing, right, is that we need to do all of this stuff, particularly in the realm of protecting people's health, purely because, well, you know, it's not, it's so dangerous, right? Like you can't allow for freedom of speech. You can't allow for people to doctors to perform medicine that goes against the recommendations because of the potential for harm, right? And the argument that I heard a while ago that just like flabbergasted me, my philosophical mind just like exploded, is that I'm all for in favor of freedom of speech and all of these human rights, but when it deals with health, it's so important that it's so dangerous that we can't allow people to have freedom of speech. We can't allow people to make decisions concerning their own rights because it's dealing in the area of health, because there's the potential for so much harm. Whenever has there not been the potential for harm with any decision like that? It's like, it's not like health is some realm where the potential for harm is so great that it's unlike, let's say, driving a car or choosing to do any career path, you know, for that matter. Everything comes with risk. I mean, that's reality. But people are using that as the ultimate argument. That's what Trudeau is saying. That's what these politicians are saying. Well, you know, in terms of, because it's a public health and safety emergency, it's justified.
You have to, and this is the thing, if this was about health, why aren't we providing just even clean sanitation and clean drinking water to not only third world countries, but even like, you know, places like Detroit and Flint, Michigan? If this was truly about health, we would be pulling out all the stops everywhere. But we've seen that it's not. A perfect example of if this was about health and protecting the vulnerable is what's been happening here in Australia is that a lot of there's been outrage of what's been occurring in nursing homes. Obviously, they're understaffed. There's people in their nursing homes, and they're not even allowed to leave their rooms anymore. So we've got elderly people who've been stuck in their rooms for like over a month now because they're afraid of them catching the Rona, the spicy cough, as we like to call it now. But they still haven't got round to, at least if they want to go on what they want to believe, giving them the third dose. There's lots of people in these health aged care facilities that still haven't had their third dose. Yet you watch the government's latest press release, they're begging people to go get the juice, get their third one. It's like, all right, we're down here at this hall. There's like 1,000 bookings available. And it's just like, well, aren't we supposed to be protecting the vulnerable and the weak? And that's still not happening. Why is this still, after 2 years, all these systems failing, you know, on multiple levels? And you can blame it on the federal government, you can blame it on the state government. You know, everyone's handballing the blame, saying, well, you know, it's a federal government issue. It's like, well, if you're a state premier, then say, screw that issue. I'm going to take control and look after my people. None of this is happening. And this is becoming more aware that, as you said, with every decision you have makes a risk, but there's a lot of people who are not even making decisions. And again, it leads to that whole apathy and that whole underlying thing of just standing back and letting things sort of happen for the worst. Just
Absolutely.
Like we've seen with the crime rates exploding now around the world, and America, especially in America, we've seen crime rates exploding, and people are like, why is this happening? I'm like, well, you've pumped people up with fear for the last 2 years. You've taken away their livelihoods and their ways in which they can survive. You've isolated them from their friends and their loved ones, and you're wondering why people are going crazy now on airplanes and in the streets and Like this is not rocket science. Like
Absolutely.
this is, you know.
I keep thinking about what you're laying down in the rhetoric here, and I feel like there is this element that is missing from this thing, and it's this spiritual component. It's like we're so focused about the material side of things. The reason we fear is because, oh, we're going to die. The reason that we're doing all of this kind of stuff is kind of devoid from any kind of foundation of, like, or call it religion, spirituality, what you will, because classically when what I would argue is when we had more of a kind of spiritual mentality, people would understand, one, the people die, and as a result, that's an aspect of life. I mean, the idea of being so concerned from a governmental standpoint on doing everything you possibly can to protect the potentiality of death, like, takes away from people's ability to make decisions for themselves, you know, because I think real spirituality is grounded in the concept of free will, because ultimately we realize that we're going to die. And I think a huge part of transcending this kind of physical existence is the understanding that life is about living for, you know, experiences, and realizing that at some point this will come to an end. So placing your mindset on what might happen, fear, this whole agenda, and starting to, like, structure your entire life so strongly around the what if, takes you away from this, which has classically been the spiritual realm of, like, surrendering yourself to a higher power, realizing that, yeah, you live your life, but ultimately you're going to die. You can't get so caught up in trying to control people, because there are certain things that are out of your hands. But now the government has said, well, we don't care about any they don't even look at some of the people that you mentioned in these homes. It's not like you have a conversation with them to figure out whether or not they value what their values are. It's like, we're just going to assume that you don't want to die because you're so afraid of death. You have no spiritual outlook, and you'd rather stay alive and not be able to see your family and your friends. I mean, that's what your values are, rather than having a conversation with these people to try to figure out what their religion is, what their values are, and giving them the ability to decide. It's like the spiritual element is no longer there. And
No.
just getting into I guess the spiritual side of things, the metaphysics of this thing. I mean, how are you coping with things? I mean, do you tend to have a spiritual outlook in what is going on? What are some things perhaps that have given you comfort, if any, in the kind of a environment that we're caught up in?
I have. I was actually talking about this with someone the other day, and I'm lucky in the sense that it comes down to the people who I have around me who are like-minded in the community I have. I mean, I have practiced meditation myself. I mean, my PhD is going to be in meditation and the criminal mind, which I'm writing right now. I'm actually going to try and put a program into a juvenile population. And I think meditation is one of the best things, because what I learned from Buddha, and, you know, I'm not religious at all. In fact, I would say that I'm atheist, if anything, but I am spiritual, if that makes sense. And what I learned from Buddha is, you know, Buddha became who he was because, you know, he used to be, if you know the story about him, it's very interesting. He used to be this rich prince, and he didn't want to die. And what he found out was, you know, life's not about being addicted to the past or being anxious about the future, but it's about knowing and accepting that things change.
And that is the antidote. That ties into what I've been talking about.
And that's the only thing we can rely on. We can't rely on the only solid universal thing that we have is that everything changes. And that's whether the universe changes, us as people changes, our mentality changes. That's the only thing that is a universal law, is that things change. And that's what's getting me through this, is that knowing that regardless of how good things are, it can still change to bad. And no matter how bad things are, things can change to good. And that's what has been sort of driving me through all this, because, you know, as they say, this too shall not pass. This too shall pass. So for me, that's what's been helping me get through this. And as I said, I have my community of people. Like, I've noticed from a lot of things that I've watched, especially from a lot of high profile, you know, I don't know if you've heard of John Douglas. He's a criminal profiler for serial killers. He ended up having a nervous breakdown because after what he saw. And I find that in our society, the majority of people, they have their work 9 to 5, and then they go off and they drink on the weekends. Alcohol is the depressant. They don't have anything else but this sort of constant perpetual way of staying sort of subdued. I'm lucky that I have a community of people which we go out, and it's sort of this artistic free expression community, like you through my partner and the music scene and the festival scene, where I can go out and reconnect and have these spiritual moments with these people. Not many people have that. Not many people have that connection where they can actually have a release and be themselves and be vulnerable. And I've only learned that in the last 3 years, that after finding the love of my life and being able to express all my darkest fears and desires and still being accepted and still being loved. And I think that's what's missing. And then you go online and people get attacked for thinking one way or another. And I've always said online, we've got to stop, you got to stop isolating people. You got to stop excluding people and blocking people, because this is what's making things worse and causing the division more. And this has happened between the friends and families. Like I know family members who weren't even allowed to be around each other because of the shakalaka. And again, moving away, like being more immersed in technology as our way of connecting is becoming more apparent. And if we have time, we can get into that whole metaverse conversation.
Yeah, we got to get into that. We got to get into that.
But I think it comes down to just finding your tribe and feeling loved and feeling honored and vulnerable for you being who you are, and knowing things will change is what got me through this.
That's powerful. Because I remember when I first met you and you told me that you studied criminology, and you were actually, I think I remember you saying you're really fascinated about studying all of this dark side of stuff. That to me,
I was watching serial killer documentaries all last night. I can't get enough of it. I find the dark side of the human conditioning. So like I watch serial killer documentaries because it's more relaxing than what's happening in the world right now.
Yeah, but that's the point I wanted to make. Like it's powerful because more often than not, I find anyway, a lot of people that get too immersed in the negativity, what's going on, like they see the dark side of humanity. I mean, there are people that have seen what's going on. They've uncovered this reality, right, over the last couple of years, and they've been so changed by it that it's been too much. Like there's actually a doctor in Germany, I forget his name, that actually committed suicide after he found out everything that's going on in terms of what's going on. It wasn't in relation to all the people who are dying from COVID. But anyway.
Well, that's why people don't want to accept the truth, because it's too much for their soul. So they'd rather have cognitive diffness, because it means if I'm wrong about this, it shatters their whole world reality.
Exactly. But when you have the grounding of understanding that, I would say, despite the power of the sun, there's always darkness on half of the planet. And it's this quote from Superman, right? But it's this idea that just because there'll always be evil in the world, just because there is this negative force out there are people, believe it or not, and all the hippies out there that want to say, it's just light and love. Oh, there's no evil. Yeah, there are people that are actively trying to destroy other people, right? It doesn't mean that there isn't goodness, though. And realizing that that is an aspect of life. Granted, we've gone through these moments where there is a lot of love. There is also that stuff can change. And I guess because you have this balanced understanding of the yin and the yang, you've incorporated this shadow understanding of the human being into your worldview. You're a bit more grounded, and you can delve into the dark side of things without being overtaken by it with this pain, misunderstanding as to why this stuff goes on. And I just think it's really powerful, because I think one of the things we're really battling right now, or at least a lot of us light workers, as we say, is trying to understand, I guess, those that haven't really delved into the darkest elements of humanity. They're trying to understand how this stuff can go on. Because if you buy into what some of these conspiracy theorists are saying, like I was amazed to find out people like Rainer Fuellmich, who is this famous lawyer that's been speaking about everything that's been going on, to hear some of the things that he has been saying in regards to the people that are actively trying to do what they're doing. It's like even conspiracy theorists, like myself, are like, whoa, like this stuff, people like him are actually saying this stuff in the open. This isn't in the realm of like pseudoscience now. Like this is reality. There are people that are actively trying to do what he claims, which is it's not pleasant. It makes you realize that there is a very dark side to things.
It is. And I've seen it all. Absolutely depravity of you know, like I'm talking about absolutely, you know, from what I've looked at, decapitations, absolutely ripping people apart. You know, people,
Torture, things
people,
that governments have done.
absolute
Yeah.
torture and everything
Yeah.
like that. So I can see that, and you know, I do have my moments where sometimes that, yeah, it does get to me, but there's a way in which I can stand back and look at it. And I think that's why when everything's going down in the world, I'm telling people, look, this is actually happening, and people don't want to accept it. I think I can accept it a lot easier when I notice a truth and can actually see the reality for what it is, not what I wish it to be, which is a Buddhist way of thinking.
Absolutely.
You know, you have to stop and not be so cognitive dissonant or you know, that whole confirmation bias, and realize, like, I have to accept this. I don't like it. It hurts my heart. It hurts my soul knowing that these people are out there doing this. But what's the other option? Standing back and letting it happen and becoming evil just like them.
That's a salient point. You mentioned something there that's really powerful, like just being confronted with the truth. I mean, you can either allow the truth to change you, or you stay. And unfortunately, the universe will bend you, you know, and people that don't bend, essentially they get broken. And this is where we see the fracturing, the schizophrenia, or the cognitive
That's why we're
dissonance.
seeing people go crazy. We're seeing people
Absolutely.
go crazy
And
because they don't want to be confronted with the truth, so they're taking it out on each other.
But this kind of brings me in tangentially just to the world that's been created right now. Like, it's very unreal. Like, even in the realm of the metaverse, it's like people are so disconnected from reality now. And I think a lot of people would argue that this is by design. You know, the more that you can take people away from society, interactions with people, how to, to understand what is going on and things like that, the more easy they become to control. I mean, we did this in ancient Rome with the gladiatorial arena. Essentially, you distract people. Hey, here's some shiny things to play with, kitty. Oh, don't take notice of all the conquering and all the horrible things that we're doing, you know, that are making your life miserable. Yeah, let's. I remember learning Roman history, which was so fascinating to me as a kid, and the beauty. It basically, all of Rome was centered around this idea of the gladiatorial arena. Like it was supposed to be symbolic in that there are people that are essentially striving for glory. But the politics of this is that essentially through this entertainment, you distract people from the reality. It's kind of like a magician casting this trick, and it's like, hey, just focus on this, plebs. Don't focus on what is really going on here, like all of this other stuff. Just focus on the pursuit of glory, and yeah, you'll be hypnotized.
You distract them from their own poverty and everything else, and give them the crumbs. And
absolutely.
That's
all. That's the metaverse.
Going into the metaverse, we'll finish off.
Right.
So I think the timing of the I mean, I don't know if you believe in coincidences, but there's too many things that have happened that are too coincidental.
Synchronicity.
So of course, so we've got COVID, we've locked people in their houses. We're now used to things like this, Zoom calls and interaction. Kids are now used to online learning. Kids are even more ingrained into their phones. So we isolate people completely. And then right after we come out of COVID, we launch a new form of technology of being all enveloped into this augmented virtual reality. And there's been like people who I know who've actually put the glasses on, and they're like, they got so scared because it feels so real.
Oh, wow.
So you've got to, I mean, I know people, I've got a friend in Florida, and she's got a friend who doesn't even leave the house anymore because she's still scared of COVID. So this technology is perfect for someone like that. And you're going to have a lot of people like this. So it's no surprise that it's just dropped at the same time as now that we're coming out of a pandemic. And I was actually thinking, what would this world look like in the future, where everyone is plugged in, sort of like, you know, I don't know if you've seen that movie Ready Player One.
Okay, yes, I have. That's another good one. I was going to pick another
film.
movie, but go on. Yeah.
But like everyone's like, or Matrix, everyone's plugged in. So how do you control or monitor these people? Now we're looking at things like biometrics. How would you monitor someone's biometrics once they're plugged in? And then you got to think about, what is the future crime going to look like? My idea of the way people can take advantage of this crime is, if you're lying there immersed in a virtual reality how do you know what's going on around you? What's to stop a burglar coming in, killing you, and then getting into your data and then downloading or sending all your crypto? So obviously you'd have to be sort of somewhat biometrically attached to this technology, correct? And now we've got Elon Musk bring out Neuralink.
Oh, and don't get me. Look, I've actually been a pretty staunch proponent of Elon Musk. You know, even though a lot of people in the hippie world criticize him because he's involved in some stuff which, in a larger context, can be very damaging, like this, you know, the Starlink projects and so forth. But yeah, look, he's definitely very pro freedom, but I think he is a little myopic. I think perhaps I could be mistaken. Perhaps he's just incredibly able to see the bigger picture, and he does want all of this stuff, you know. But just more recently, in terms of the Neuralink device, on one hand, I think it's amazing technology. I think it has the potential to cure people that are dealing with Alzheimer's or a whole bunch of you know, physical problems. But you know, me being the big hippie I am, the animal lover, I recently found out that I can't remember the exact number, but a large percentage of the I think it was apes, chimpanzees, or something like that were actually used in the trial. Like, they've all died. I think it was 18 out of the 25. I could be wrong on the actual number, but it was a huge amount. Now, of course, these things are definitive. You can't prove these things definitively. You can always make the argument, you know, oh, look, they could have died from something else. You know, it's got nothing to do with the juice. You know, it's like, it's one of these things. But I think the problem lies in the way the technology is used. If we move into the realm where we're disregarding basic standards of ethics in order to bring these things about, like, oh, it's going to do so much good, let's just experiment on people or animals, I would say, and we're going to stop forcing this stuff on people. This is the other thing, because often these things get invented, right, you know, with all the consideration of making the world better, but then you give these to governments, and essentially they force this stuff on people, and then they circumvent their rights, and essentially sometimes these technologies are not the best. I mean, Bitcoin as a beautiful technology can be used actually to control people. A lot of people have fears in regards to it being used to track everything. And if you give this to the government, and now everything that you do needs to be on the blockchain, well, now you have a tyranny. And I think this is the problem with the metaverse. Like, I can see a situation now where it's one thing if the momos want to use this and completely detach from reality, and as a result, get their items stolen from them and so forth. I mean, I, for one, I love gaming. I love this kind of stuff. But as soon as it starts becoming an aspect of society now that is regulated by the majority of the masses, so you can't purchase a vehicle, you can't leave your home unless, of course, you connect to the metaverse. Everything is hardwired into this system, and you're tapped out. Now you become a slave. And then the next level is, like, think about bad actors. Their ability. Imagine if someone is able to tap into your consciousness somehow through this device. I mean, well, imagine if this is just
like the Manchurian candidate.
Yeah, I mean, my worst fear is integrating something like the Neuralink device into this metaverse, right? So now you attach this thing into your body. It's not something you can just put on and put off. And now computers can gain access. I mean, they can now. I mean, just because something isn't physically on your body doesn't mean it can't scan you and influence you. There are all realms of technology now that are manipulating with our physiology and essentially brainwashing us through subliminal programming and so forth. But you bring this Neuralink technology in with a metaverse in addition to all the other crazy stuff that we're going on, and now we have Ayn Rand's state of ultimate inversion, where essentially the individual has no free will whatsoever. That's on a subconscious level as well.
Yeah, and then you got, you know, people with their digital identity that's uploaded. And then, you know, we then have the whole social credit system, which is now moving forward towards it. I mean, it's no surprise that, you know, if you think about what's it called? They call it universal basic income. You know, people can sit there in their homes, be paid, and then give themselves and their data towards the big tech companies, you know, and that's what probably will happen. You know, I don't know. Like, I hope, and I believe in humanity's desire to actually feel real and connected to one another. You know, a perfect, like, why do you think incels go crazy? And I don't know if you know what an incel is.
Yeah,
involved, they go crazy
that's it.
because they don't have that touch and that connection to people. And that's
Sure.
the most important thing that we have, is that connection, that touch, and that love and that respect we have for one another. So if you
Mm,
ever feel like you're moving away from that, or you're getting angry at people for no reason, you got to like resort back to that. And I do believe maybe people, like, a lot of people won't, because, you know, a lot of people are, you know, are prone to do whatever the masses do, unfortunately. Like, look what's happening now on Facebook. They've got this Wordle game that everyone's playing now, and everyone's showing these like little blocks of green and yellow. Like, it's just a new thing. Everyone is always going to be part of the new fad, and it's up to each of us to understand that we need to step away from this and just like encompass and look at people as their individuals and who they are and what we want to have for our future and our children's future. Like, if you want to have kids, you know,
absolutely.
you know, do you want your kids to grow up in this sort of mass adopted technology? Or, I mean, we're already seeing it now. Kids don't play anymore. You know, I remember when I was a kid, you know, we used to come in for dinner when the street lights came on.
Yeah.
And we're missing all of that. And
Or you
I,
could
I,
say, in terms of kids playing, that the definition of play has just been upgraded. Like what we call
mm,
play, going out and playing catch on the streets. Now it's been turned into this: or hook yourself up to the metaverse, and or make you know, TikTok videos of you being scantily clad, you know, that are expose yourself to all these creeps and whatnot. That that's their form of play. And I guess you have to ask yourself: is that the kind of world that you want to be living in? That you think is going to be allowing you to really express yourself as a truly um, conscious being?
and it just comes down to, I guess I said, Hugh, you as a person, what do you want to leave as your legacy, and what do you want to leave for your children? And I'm hope, like, I've got a lot of friends who are very conscious and are very on switched on like that, and seeing them raise their kids has been wonderful. Um, and then you've got the other person, your mum at the supermarket, and the kid's on the iPhone. The mum takes the iPhone off, and the kid has a tantrum. It's a really interesting world where
We're moving into, no
we're
doubt.
moving into, and I'm grateful I spent the better half of my life without the internet.
Yeah, you know what? I've never had that thought before, you know, because I've always been like this age of the geek Aquarian kind of thing. But I'm actually so glad that I'm a child of the '80s, you know, and
Yeah.
I mean I would have probably enjoyed the '70s a bit more, but I
Mm.
feel like we really have benefited from a past that has not been as inundated with this technology. And just for the bonus section over here, just to wind things down, this will be for my Patreons. If I was to ask you what you see the future being like, uh, I mean, just given everything, our current trajectory, how would you paint that picture? Where do you see things headed? On
There's a
that
great
note,
on
sorry, go
yeah.
on. You know, I'll let you finish off. Do you wanted to mention something?
Just a great book if you ever want to read about how interwound the pharmaceutical company is, by the author. His name is John Abramson, and he's got this book called Sickening, which is just released, and it's an eye-opener. I suggest
Brilliant.
everyone go read that, and go read obviously Philip Zimbardo's The Lucifer Effect.
Oh, that's the thing that I'm not sure if we went into enough. You mentioned, so what is the Lucifer effect exactly?
That's just again, standing back and letting evilness happen because you're following orders or being complacent.
That is so interesting because I always have a pet peeve when it comes to this, because etymologically, when we speak about Lucifer, it means light bringer, like the bringer of light. But we found that the term has been obfuscated because within the Judeo-Christian mindset, that Lucifer is basically this fallen angel and deals with evil. So we attribute that to being evil. Like essentially, the idea is that we're seeing evil before us. When truth is, from the etymology, we're dealing with light here. Like the real concept of Lucifer is the light bringer. Like if we truly allowed light to fill our minds, like I always mention the phrase illuminate your mind with light. I mean, essentially illuminate your mind with wisdom. You know, essentially, if we gain a better understanding of what is going on, we wouldn't fall victim to this evil. But I just had to mention that in regards to the Lucifer effect. what we are seeing is pure evil, and that's taking place. And because so many people are doing nothing to actually truly illuminate their minds and see what's going on, we're allowing the darkness to envelop the light. And realistically, all it ever takes is just a bit of light to shine away all the darkness, right?
Yeah. But sometimes the light can be confronting, and we just have to face it anyway.
No doubt, the light can burn, and sometimes it is too. It's dangerous, no doubt.
Yeah.
But as per usual, it has been an absolute pleasure. I've enjoyed this conversation as much as any. Like, this has been one of my favorite conversations ever, and we really touched on a whole bunch of really juicy stuff. I'm gonna hope that YouTube does not censor or try to shadow ban this information. I'm gonna make sure I censor all the appropriate parts.
If not, I'll post it as well. So
yeah, let's get it out there, because our last podcast, like, it got way more than I usually get. You know, like, a lot of people take an interest in the things that you were saying, Nicolette. So thank you for being you. Thank you for coming on the Crystal Journey podcast. And you are a scholar, a warrior priestess of the highest caliber. And I respect your Zen-like attitude. You know, being able to face the truth regardless of how uncomfortable it may be. And adapting yourself to it. I think there's a lot of power within that, and people can definitely learn from your mindset. So thank you once again.
Oh, thank you as always for always just knowing everything and speaking your truth, and everything that you contribute to this world. So once again, it's all on you.
Thank you, Nicolette. So I'm going to put your links down. You're on the Instagrams, and if people want to get a hold of you, I know you probably got some books coming out. You're probably working on a bundle.
Got one actually that I'm sort of working on in the background.
Okay. Well, when you have that out, let us know, and I'll promote it if you want to come on. I'm more than happy to have you on again. Really appreciate these conversations, and thank you once again, Nicolette.
Thank you. Bye.
You take care.
Bye.
Awesome. I'm gonna let you go.
We're close. We're all done now.
All done.
Thank you. Well, I'm glad you made it to Queensland.
Yeah, look, I will be back. I will be back. I've had a lot of time to think about it. I'll probably edit this out, but I think it's time to come back.
Well, let me know the dates, and we've got a few exciting events coming up that my partner has been doing. So be sure to come there and sort of be amongst our community and free yourself.
Absolutely. Always enjoy your shindigs. Definitely. Okay, I'm winding this thing down.
Okay.
So finish this thing up.
Work it, don't wait, the rest you won't make it.